This is the new HIDIZS MK12 and it is one of my favorite IEMs under $200 along with the LETSHUOER DX1, which we will talk about later. Starting with the HIDIZS MK12, I don't say this often, but these are something special. I highly recommend the red nozzles on these, and the overall sound is warm leaning, it is full, it's a little bit on the thicker side, but it's still very extended and open when it comes to the vocals. The treble extension is enough. The stage is more intimate, but everything sounds like grand and never congested. Now these do need some juice, and I wouldn't recommend driving them off your phone because they do need some scaling and some volume, but they do scale incredibly well, and I highly recommend you guys to listen to these at higher volumes, especially with like slower tracks like vocal ballads, acoustics, R&B, slow rock, like chill instrumentals and OSTs. If you love to immerse yourself in the music and just forget about reality, then there are very few IEMs that will take you on a journey like the MK12. For example, if the Explorers are a relaxing, bassy, scaling kind of set, and the Odysseys are a dynamic, all-rounder but also scaling kind of set, then the MK12s with the red nozzles are a full and powerful vocal scaling set. Artists like Billie Eilish, Frank Ocean, The Weeknd, Kali, Lana Del Rey all sound like next level with the red nozzles. Their music just fits the MK12 very well because it is raw and mid-range focused like the MK12. The main star of the show is the vocals. They're smooth, they're powerful, they're emotional. It never gets shouty even when I'm like cranking it up, and it's just very personal but also feels grand and big feeling at the same time. You get the intimacy factor, but it still feels open. Male singer sounds especially good because of the extra body and power, while still having that enough extension and clarity without feeling congested or overly husky. Obviously the MK12 isn't a sparkly or like very airy kind of set. You're not gonna get the same energy and contrast like the DX1 for example, but the clarity on them actually improves as you scale it with more volume, as you can hear the details better because everything is closer and just like more audible. Tip wise, I would recommend anything that opens up the sound a bit. For example, the clarions adds a little bit more treble to the sound. It makes the extension a little bit better, and overall still gives you that warmness, but just with a little bit more detail and clarity in the upper mids and the treble. Soft ultra clears also sound very good on these. I just wouldn't recommend things that adds more bass because it is already warm. It is already like pretty bassy overall, so you don't need more bass, but a little bit more air would be nice on these. Now as for the silver and bronze nozzles, these will sound cleaner, less warm, highlights the female artist better because there is an extra boost in the 2K regions. It kind of helps them pop out a little bit more, along with just like less warmness, less I guess coloring overall compared to the red nozzles. However, the extra elevation also means the extra nozzles don't scale as well as the red ones. It can get a bit fatiguing and a bit sharp, a bit nasally on more energetic genres like K-pop, J-pop, electronics. If you're sensitive in that like 1 to 2K region, then the silver and bronze nozzles will sound a bit shouty. But that aside, all three options will still sound great on slower and more vocal centric genres, but the main difference is that the silver and bronze nozzles are gonna be more for mid volume listening because they just don't scale that well. It's still gonna sound balanced, natural, and full, whereas if you want like a more like fully immerse yourself into the music, then that would be the red nozzles. Tech wise, the MK12 is slightly behind the DX1. It is still decent, but I wouldn't say it's my first pick when it comes to just pure performance. It is like very good when it comes to scaling. It's only matched maybe by the Explorer, but if you're looking for pure value to technical performance, there just are better options out there like the Super Mix 4, the Nova, the M6L, even the EW300 for example, the Quintet, Chopin, like all those will all feel like quicker and sharper in the attack. The decay, the separation are going to be slightly better overall, and it's going to be sound a little bit more detailed than the MK12s. So even though these are less traditional, they're less all-rounded, they're more specialized, I do still recommend giving them a shot because you rarely get a set that brings out so much emotional connection to the overall listening experience, especially at only quote-unquote only $200 and $100 if you got these early. Because tonality wise, I would take these over the vast majority of IEMs under 200, maybe for the exception of the DX1 and the Odysseys, because I listen to a lot of IEMs, but I rarely go out of my way and then re-listen to a set on my own personal time that's not for review, unless I really like the IEM. The MK12 Reds has me doing that. I've been spamming these like almost every other night. Don't sleep on them if your library fits. These are a very good vocal set. Now as for the DX1, this would also be a very good vocal set. In my opinion, this is like a vocal twin to the MK12s. It's cleaner, it's more balanced, it's less forward in the vocals, but it is still very musical as it has that like slight sparkle and sharpness and imaging with great dynamic contrast on top. Basically, the MK12 is smoother, it's warmer, it's more intimate, whereas the DX1 is livelier, it's more vibrant, less in your face, with better tech and vocal contrast. In terms of scaling, the MK12 Reds do scale better. You can crank the living crap out of these, but the DX1 does still scales pretty great, and I would recommend them for higher volume listening at around maybe 75 to 80 dBs. Similar library as the MK12s, you know, you got your vocal stuff, your indie, slow rock, acoustics, etc. If your library works for the MK12s, then it's most likely going to work for the DX1s. Tip-wise, I would use something that's balanced, something smooth that doesn't completely kill the imaging at the same time. So something like the Software Ultra Clears would be pretty good. The Venus Velvet would be good as well, or even the Clarions if you want like a little bit more sparkle in like the treble and the upper mids. I would avoid Senkai's for the DX1s because it does gimp the upper mids and extension a bit. It takes away a little bit of the vibrancy and contrast from the vocals. But aside from that, you know, any tip will work for the most part. All in all, both sets are going to be very immersive and musical, but just different in the execution and color that they give off. For example, the MK12 is like a slow jazz bar with a very cozy and warm ambient atmosphere, whereas the DX1 is more like a restaurant with like live music and people chattering in the background. Both have one of the best vocals before the Arcanus in my opinion, and there's not much overlap in the sound because they're both pretty different when it comes to the overall like tonality, but at the same time are also good complementary sets to one another. Like if you have the cash, it would still be worth it to get both of them. Now, as for some comparisons versus the Odysseys, all three of these are going to be scaling sets at higher volume, with the difference being that both the MK12 and the DX1 are just more vocal centric and not as much of an all-rounder and bassy set like the Odysseys. The MK12, for example, is warmer and a little bit slower in the attack and decay in the bass. It feels like thicker, whereas the Odysseys, the one has like a better control, it's punchier, it's a little bit more energetic versus the warmness that you get on the MK12s. If your library is mainly hip-hop, you know, R&B with some rock and pop stuff, then the Odysseys would be a better fit because it's just the better all-rounder set. The DX1 on the other hand sounds cleaner, it's more balanced, it sounds like sweeter and more like glimmery than the Odysseys, which sounds a little bit fuller, more bassier, more all-rounded. If your library is mainly hip-hop, R&B with some like rock and pop stuff, then the Odysseys are going to be a better fit because it's just the better all-rounder set. But if you have more vocals and a slower library, then both the DX1 and the MK12 will be more enjoyable. Similarly, the Astrals will also be a better all-rounder and more technical capable IEM. It's going to be better balanced overall, not as vocal centric, works more for more genres, and has a more like aggressive and bassier sound. The Astrals are a mid-volume set, so they don't scale quite as well, which means in terms of immersion and musicality, I would still give it over to the MK12 and the DX1. The vocals hit harder on those and they have a more, I guess, natural tonality. But at the end of the day, these are very different flavors. If you listen at mid-volume and you don't care too much about the vocals, get the Astrals. If you listen louder and you love vocals, get the MK12s or the DX1s. Now, versus some other vocal sets like the EPZ P50, if you listen at mid-volume or just want a set that works for like pretty much everything, then the P50 would be a more traditional and safer vocal-centric set. They're more balanced. I guess it's like less dark in the overall sound and it fits better if you listen at a mid-volume. Tech-wise, the P50 is gonna sound more detailed, slightly better in the separation, but doesn't have the same immersion and scaling obviously because of the extra gain around 2 to 3K. In terms of the unique factor, both the MK12 and the DX1 does sound more musical and engaging to me personally, but the P50 is still a solid benchmark if you need it for like monitoring or you just need like an all-rounder. Then versus some brighter sets like the KIWIEARS 4, the CAD4 does feel airier and more detailed in the treble. It's a little bit lighter when it comes to the no way. The separation is slightly better, a little bit cleaner. The gain is a bit more, so it doesn't scale too well because of the 2K to 3K. Similar to the P50, the CAD4 also falls into that all-rounder category, with the main difference being that it's a little bit brighter, a little bit airier, a little bit sweeter sounding. If you listen at normal volume around like 60-70 dBs, then both the P50 and the CAD4 would be the better vocal set. But if you listen louder, then I would just get the MK12s and the DX1. They are the better sets to me personally. With that said, I do recommend giving the MK12 Reds and DX1 a shot. They're one of my favorites under 200, and they're not only unique but also very immersive and musical vocal powerhouses. Just make sure your library and listening volume fits before you grab them because you don't want to waste your money. But aside from that, I hope this review was helpful. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see everyone in the next one.
Shout out to Roark's Cat, Dom Q, The Skull Scottus, B. Urak, Mystic Spoon Attack, Walker Standard, User, Patrick, Polly J, Mr. Gabrielas, Giseng Young, Christopher Jackson, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, Obi, Wizard, Frickalicious, Ricardo, Tapas R, Shin Bakle, Choconorris, FKSRG, Treble Will Extended, Cousin Fat Fat, O'Reilly, Julius, Dead Riddle, Billha, Tamat, Ardmore, 777ZK, Jasper, Nicholas, Dribbless, Parham, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Addy, Brandon, and Syrah Cool Gaming. Thank you guys so much.